So the best way to find the notes on the fretboard is to start here on the E string. So you gotta pretend this nut is like a fret. So we're gonna start here on the 6th string, the E string. So that letter there is E, and as we saw on the keyboard, between the letters E and F and B and C, there's no black key. So they're half steps in between. So the distance from the E note to the F note is a half step. So from E to F is a half step. From F to G is a whole step. From G to A, because you're starting over again from the alphabet, so after G comes A, that's a whole step. After A comes B, and that's a whole step. After B comes C, and that's the other half step. So between B and C is a half step. And even if you're going backwards, it's still a half step. So we got C, after C comes D, and that's a whole step. After D comes E, and that's a whole step. So you saw we started on E and ended on E. Remember, these two dots represent the open. So there's your, and then it just keeps repeating. So if that's E, that would be a half step, would be F. And as you see, G, A, B, C. So then you go to the next string, we know that one is A. If string open is A, put your finger behind the nut there. So after A comes B, and that's a whole step. After B comes C, that's a half step. After C comes D, whole step. D to E is a whole step. E to F is a half step. F to G is a whole step. G to A is a whole step. Start on your 4th string, which is the D string. So you got D, after D comes E, that's a whole step. E to F is a half step. F to G is a whole step. G to A is a whole step. A to B is a whole step. B to C is a half step. And then C to D is a whole step. Go to the 3rd string, that string is G. So the note there is G, after G comes A, it's a whole step. A to B is a whole step. B to C is a half step. C to D is a whole step. D to E is a whole step. E to F is a half step. F to G is a whole step. Go to the 2nd string, do the same things. 2nd string is B. So you start on B, after B comes C, that's a half step. C to D is a whole step. D to E is a whole step. E to F is a half step. F to G is a whole step. G to A is a whole step. A to B is a whole step. So if you look at the last string, it's the same as the 6th string. So E, F, G, A, B, C, D. So any note there is also there. So there you go. So now you know how to find the notes on the fretboard. So now what we got to do is figure out these notes in between here. So the best way to find that is go to your A, that's the 5th fret. Anytime you lower a note, a natural note by a half step, that's called flattening. You're flattening that note. So anytime you do that, you lower it by a half step. So there's A, lowered a half step, it becomes A flat. Anytime you raise a letter, a note by a half step, you sharpen it. So that's letter A, raise it up a half step, A sharp. A flat, A sharp. So what if I go to G and I raise it up a half step? You say, isn't that G sharp? And I'd say yeah, and you'd say, isn't that also A flat? And I'd say yes. So you see, these have the same, this note shares either G sharp or A flat. So we use that for theory's sake, so right now we're not going to worry about that. It's just to make formulas work when you're constructing scales and chords. So, but if you look between B and C, they're a half step. So if I raised B a half step, it would not be B sharp, it would be C. And if I lowered C a half step, it would be B, not C flat. You'll find later on there is some theory that uses C flats and B sharps and stuff. That's just when you start getting crazy formulas and you need to make things work. So, and just like E and F, if I move E up a half step, it's not E sharp, and F down a half step is not F flat. So it's important to learn these because a lot of your roots of your scales and your chords, you got to know how to find the notes on the fretboard. Let's say I had an A minor pentatonic scale. If you know this scale, the root is here, that's A, and then if I play this scale shape, there's A minor pentatonic. If I move it down to G, did the same scale shape, there's G. Now I play G minor pentatonic, C minor pentatonic. So how easy it is to change keys. On a keyboard it's not so easy. Same as a chord. Here's a simple power chord. There's my root again on the 6th string, that's A. If I moved it down a whole step, it would be G power chord, F power chord, C power chord. But see, the shape, that distance stays the same. It's just, you're really kind of looking at that and you keep that shape. Guitar is all about shapes and patterns. So I would start trying to learn the notes on the 6th string and on the 5th string, because that's also a lot of your roots for your chords are going to be right there on that 5th string. And if you look, these dots will help you. So if that's E, just know that F is that 1st fret, and then look at these dots, G, A, and B. So if you can remember, that 1st dot is G, that's A, that's B, and then look at this dot here, on both sides of it, you have C and D. So think of this dot, you have C and D, and then you're back to E. Remember, anything you do here, if that's G, that's G, that's A, that's A, B, C, C. Same on every string. So you gotta remember, just think of each string going this way as like a keyboard, as a piano. You get your notes going this way. But on guitar, we have 6 pianos stacked on top of each other, and you're starting at a different point. So I have E here, but then my keyboard kind of switches. So this way now you can play like this, like a keyboard, but you can also go this way. And that's how you get your chords. Instead of trying to get chords like that, you're going this way. So there you go.